Now, the new president of ECOWAS, President Bassirou Diomaye Faye, who is now the newly minted chairman of ECOWAS, paid a visit to Bamako to meet his colleague, General Assimi Goïta. And ladies and gentlemen, you see, this visit is not what Western media wants you to unravel. All right. They don't want you to know why, the real truth about this visit. And for the people that were on this platform some days ago, remember I told you all that the president of Senegal was going to visit Mali because they reached out to the AES. Normally, they said the AES should support the ECO, which is the 2027 financial project of ECOWAS, and the AES seriously turned it down from the bat. So now, uh, President Bassirou Diomaye Faye promised that he was personally going to pull it off. Like, don't worry, I'm going to visit them and I'm going to get the job done. So, and just like he said, I thought it was going to change, but he proved that he's the man that they call him. Now, let's get into the detail because on the surface, right, the official narrative is two West African leaders meeting to discuss security cooperation with each other. They are reopening the Dakar Bamako trade corridor. Now, let me tell you something about the Dakar Bamako trade corridor. Why are they reopening that trade corridor? Before we talk about why they are reopening the Dakar Bamako trade corridor, because it's now going to be a conversation. The question you should ask is, why did they close the corridor in the first place? If they're trying to reopen the Dakar Bamako trade corridor, why was it closed? At least if you want to reopen something, it means you closed it. Somebody closed it, right? If you want to know who closed the corridor, you ask the question, who controls the president of Senegal? Who controls the Senegalese administration? Who directs Senegal? Who vets everything that Senegal does on the geopolitical landscape of West Africa? Then you will understand why the Dakar Bamako corridor got closed in the first place. Now, we've said something on this platform before, but I want to revisit again. In Senegal, right at the heart of Senegal in Dakar, you have almost all the Western intelligence assets. Now, when I'm talking about assets, I'm talking about locals and I'm talking about international assets. From media to MI5 to MI6 to CIA, you have everything in Dakar, Senegal. You see, most of the French forces, when they were kicked out of the AES, they did not go back to France. You saw that aircraft, and that was the facade. When you break through the wall and when you scratch the wall and you look at what is right there inside, those forces were simply redeployed to Benin Republic, they were redeployed to Ivory Coast, and they were redeployed to Dakar, Senegal. Some of them, the operatives, they were redeployed to Guinea. Because on the outside, when you look at the president of Guinea, you think, oh, this is all sovereignty. But that is one of the top collaborators of Emmanuel Macron. But that is a story for another day. We're talking about Senegal. They want to reopen the corridor. They closed the corridor because Bassirou Diomaye was working on the orders of Emmanuel Macron to further tighten the sanction. And part of the Western sanction that was imposed on Mali through the ECOWAS project is closing the Dakar Bamako corridor. Now, they did not just close it diplomatically, they physically closed it with another proxy occupying force called the JNIM. So when you see the JNIM, it's like you have a conventional military apparatus and you have a dirty military apparatus. I want you to see it like that. I don't want you to see these groups as terrorist groups. Now, why am I saying this? If you look at the way they try to refine the names of this group, you will hear rebels, you will hear freedom fighters, you will hear different names. You know why they're giving them this name? It is not because of any big reason. It is because when you push their occupying force, which is their main military instructors, out of your territory, so they cannot physically project power within your territory. And you end up breaking all the soft power projection through their media, through scholarships, through NGOs, and they no longer have that initiative within your territory. The next thing they do is to activate the proxy of their dirty military reinforcement, which is the local lackeys that you call terrorists, you call JNIM. It is not JNIM. I call them the dirty machineries of France. So if they cannot do it the conventional way, they prefer to use those guys. And that is why those guys are troubling Mali. Have you seen the video of Russia dealing with them recently in a close combat operation in Niono? I take my hat off to those personnel. But that said, right, they're talking about reopening trade corridor. They're talking about reopening, negotiation. They're talking about regional unity. Now, Faye arrives alone. All right? He arrives alone. You see, when the West wants to do something, they always like to do it in a way where everybody talks about it. There will always be a sugar coating. They can't just do it bland like that. They always like to put some theatrics to it. You see, their main augmenting to make the whole thing effective is to not allow any ECOWAS delegation to escort the current president of ECOWAS to Bamako. So that is like you want to take them off guard, like, that feeling that Diomaye Faye is at home when he's in Mali. I want you to establish that very well. I'm visiting you, I'm supposed to come with my security guard, and I tell everybody to stay back. It's like me telling you, like, I feel at home when I'm with you, even though I represent everything that is against you. Do you get the psychology? Now, no ECOWAS delegation. Note that because it will be relevant at the end of this discussion. So it looks like neighbor talking to neighbors. That's what it literally looks like. But the funny aspect of the whole thing is when you understand the financial architecture of ECOWAS, all right, and the deals that Diomaye Faye has signed with France in 2026 alone. I don't want to go back to 2025 because it's mind-boggling. I want us to just sit on 2026 alone. The deals that Bassirou Diomaye Faye has signed and the decisions he has made on behalf of France. I want you to get that. Everything that guy did in Senegal, he did it on behalf of France, not for his country. All right. So you see, this visit is about something that is entirely different. And that different thing is about putting pressure on Mali. All right. It's about putting pressure on the AES. This is not see, they are talking about lifting the sanction. They are talking about reopening the Dakar Bamako trade corridor. Is a very typical Western tactics. If you do this deal and you agree with us that you return back to ECOWAS, you will allow, and you will break partnership with certain people. We are going to do all these things. It is, you see, when they say discussing reopening the Dakar Bamako trade corridor, it's a negotiating chip. It's a bargaining chip. If you play that, if you play towards this direction, we are going to allow you to do this. So that is the point about it. So when you understand the financial architecture of those who pull the strings, all right, you definitely know that Bassirou Diomaye will always represent the interests of certain states. Now, ECOWAS is trying to pull the AES back into its fold. That is why they even made a proposal to the AES that, okay, in 2027, we are trying to, implement a financial sovereignty decision, right? Okay, we're trying to print the currency, we're trying to, integrate our economy, we're trying to do this, an economy that has been integrated since 19 something, right? And it's not working. We don't even see the integration from God knows where. So you're trying to tell us that you need the AES to join for everything to make sense. So make that make sense. All right. So now let me give you the evidence. All right. Because, without the evidence, there is no Android community. So let's just go to 2026 alone. First of all, you need to understand who Faye is in 2026. It's not the man you knew in 2023. It's not the Sonko Faye Sonko. No. When he was elected in March 2024, his campaign, the PASTEF movement, they promised a rupture with France. Now, these were the pillars that brought PASTEF to power. Now, the root of PASTEF was Sonko and Faye. Now, I will tell you, you need to understand this story so that you can appreciate the whole thing that we're trying to unravel. They came with the promise that they would break everything with France. That was why the people voted them. So you should know at this point that the people of Senegal are anti-imperial. A lot of nations in Africa are anti-imperial. But what happened to them? Why are they not moving in a certain way? We are going to give you the illustration with this Senegal situation. So after the election, but before the election, they promised a rupture with France. They said they were going to be anti-imperialist, which till today Sonko is. They said, they would be Pan-Africanist. They said they would be sovereignty first and everything comes second. The people of Senegal voted not for Sonko or Faye. They voted for that vision, that Pan-African vision, that anti-French vision. So when you hear anti-French, when you hear certain people, most especially from Western outlets, that there is anti-French sentiment that is being pushed by Russian propaganda, is there any relationship between Russia and Senegal? You can't continue to duck and dive and juke and, you can't do that. Africa has changed. People can see for themselves. So when you have this type of situation when the imperialists can no longer control the popular opinion of a country, even if they normally, like of standard practice, pay celebrities, pay influencers, pay a lot of people to project their power in a soft way, to influence the mind of naive young Africans, right? It has failed with an overwhelming statistics in these countries, right? So they voted for that vision. So in May 2026, Faye fired. Now listen, everybody in PASTEF before the election. See, these people were elected. Every representative in that party was elected because they were in alignment with that goal. Matter of fact, when I look at the structure of these countries, My thought is that the coup was supposed to start from Mali, then ram into Senegal, then reverberate back to Chad. This is what I think. Because if you look at the structure, that is what it looks like. But something happened along the line. So every Pan-African individual, representative of a large community and different ethnic group that actually constituted the PASTEF, they were all they were all fired by Diomaye Faye. Even Osman Sonko was removed from the prime minister. The man who carried the sovereignty message as prime minister, Osman Sonko, ladies and gentlemen, publicly stated that Faye had betrayed the PASTEF project. Now, listen, Faye was part of the PASTEF project. Why did he betray? Because he was obeying the call of certain powers, of certain people. So, ladies and gentlemen, when the situation got to that point, all right, the entire reform, because, Faye discovered that Sonko was becoming more popular. He purged the entire reformist wing of the movement in PASTEF. And as of today, he's trying to form a new party, if he has not even formed it already. Now, then the IMF austerity package came in. And Sonko at the time, who was the prime minister, called it a blow to Senegal sovereignty. The same structural adjustment playbook that has kept African nations dependent on Western influence and institution for decades. Faye submitted to it. This is the man that is visiting Mali today. All right? So first of all, he destroyed the entire Pan-African struggle of his country, damaged the vision. Secondly, he embraced the IMF as an institution. And you know, the IMF will make some rules. They will create some laws that your country, your administration have to follow that is anti or counterproductive to nation building and development of a society. Now, after that, all right, the French military base is the next thing because it's crucial. Faye made a decision that everybody celebrates until this day. They said he closed the visible military base of France in Senegal. Yes, that is true. He closed the base, but something replaced the base that is even more dangerous than the physical military base that a lot of people see. A defense framework. And I will tell you why they built this whole arrangement. Now, a defense framework and a letter of intent giving French naval base permanent access. They said the contract is indefinite. So French military apparatus will have access to Senegalese water permanently. And I will now tell you what they are doing in that waters. No barracks needed in Senegal. France got what it needed without permission. All right? They were the occupying force on land. Now they occupy the Senegalese waters. All right? So this is neo-colonialism dressed up as partnership. And in August 2025, Faye went to Paris and told Macron, I want you to stamp this again. He said France remains an important partner on all levels to Senegal. This is not the language of Pan-African Russia. This is the language of alignment to a certain influence. So when Faye showed up in Bamako yesterday, he arrived as a leader who has already chosen his side to be on the French side. This is the language of alignment. So he is not, he has already picked a side, and that side is not the side of African struggle. It is not a side that will get that young African kid out of poverty. That is not a side of Faye. And one of the most stupid arguments that anybody will make is that he's one of the young, he's loved, he's a young African president. A old puppet is better than a young puppet. Do you know how bad? Do you know how terrible? Do you know how damaging a young puppet can be to the destiny of so many children of a particular nation? So, who is Faye representing at this point? And why is he representing that organization at this point? Now, before we get into that, let me tell you what France is doing on Senegal waters. So initially, now, apart from telling you what France is doing on Senegalese waters, I will also tell you why that border is closed, because they did not just close it. Mali agreed to that border. Let it be closed. The reason is because anything that comes through the port of Senegal was being monitored by both intelligence and proxy assets of France. If Mali buys fuel and they want to ship it through that Bamako-Dakar corridor, you will just hear that JNI blew up everything. I know a lot of people, you knew that time when a lot of convoy will be coming and JNI will spring up from God knows where and they will burn the entire fuel convoy. It is because of the whole intelligence architecture that have been created. It has been created so much so that it has now become a fundamental block of almost the Senegalese society. If you ask a Senegalese person now that, do you have Western intelligence assets in your country? They might probably tell you no. But some of them are and they don't even know. That's how bad and how deep it is. So the purpose, at a point, Russia brought in equipment, military equipment from Mali. They did not trust Senegal again, so they brought it to Guinea. Do you know what they did? They monitored that particular shadow fleet ship that came to Guinea. They monitored it. They knew the number of military capability that was going to be sent to Bamako. Can we say in 2026, via the manuscript of the Iran-US conflict, that if your territory is serving the purpose of an enemy state, you are equally an enemy? But that is not the conversation for today. So I've been able to clarify what they are doing on that waters and why they signed that agreement, that naval agreement. And this has also, when people create a certain capability to make trouble, it is not your business to blame them. Your business is to create a counter capability to avert that disaster. Are you aware that in Togo right now, the Malian shipment and the AES shipment is using the water of Lomé right now, and you have Russian personnel on the ground? And recently that has happened, we're now having some Togolese speaking as if they don't know what is going on, even though they have been planted by France to raise the conversation that it is unconstitutional, because that's what I'm hearing now, that why are Russian personnel in their country? But you are not asking why French personnel are in your country. Is that not some high-level derangement? So, it is just, so Equatorial Guinea and Lomé. This is where, some arrangement have been made with Russia. They are reinforcing position. They're trying to break that western coastal encirclement around the Gulf of Guinea. If you notice, the United States said they had maritime deal with Nigeria. The United States claimed that they have maritime deal with Benin Republic. France equally did it. Ivory Coast, US, France. Senegal, US, France. So when you look at all those things, Mauritania too. So what is going on around this axis is a sort of encirclement. Call it what it is. There's no shame in it. But Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, they always find a solution because productive people are not always after fault. They're after the solution. Now, here's where it gets dark. ECOWAS claimed to be 90% self-funded by African states. They call it community levy, a 0.5% tax on import from non-ECOWAS states. It sounds independent, right? But that is the facade that they want you to believe because they see that Africans are beginning to ask critical questions. Now, that 90% figure that pays for the secretariat, it pays for the offices, it pays for salaries. All right? It does not pay for what matters because the security operation, the peacekeeping missions, the sanctions enforcement, because that is part of the functionality of ECOWAS, sanctions. And also the military intervention. And all those things are going to play out very soon. You are going to hear them. Who funds those things? They are funded by the European Union. We are talking about 213 million euros in agreement that was approved in 2023 alone. 213 million euros that was used to fund ECOWAS, this fake organization that we don't know what purpose it serves in West Africa. Another 110 million euros. Look at the currency that is being paid to them. Euros, not dollars. So you should understand whose interest ECOWAS will stand for till the day ECOWAS will be destroyed. Another 110 million. They can never be sovereign. Forget it. They can never be pro-African. Forget it. So another 110 million euro project funded by EU, Germany, Spain. These are documented facts, families. Now, who pays the bulk of the community levy into ECOWAS? Nigeria. Nigeria contributes 70% of that levy. So Nigerian taxpayers, your brothers and sisters, they are subsidizing an organization whose security agenda is shaped by Brussels, by Berlin, and by Paris. So this is the structure of ECOWAS. And the current chairman of that organization is going to Mali without any delegation or security apparatus, telling you all that he's going to have some Pan-African negotiation in Mali. Ladies and gentlemen, does that narrative even make sense? Now, here is the key thing here, ladies and gentlemen. The EU does not need formal permission to control ECOWAS. They do not need a veto. That is not how it works. ECOWAS chairmanship is chosen by consensus among the African head of state. That is the rule. Faye was elected chairman because the member state of the ECOWAS commission, they voted him. The EU has no formal role. That is technically true, but here is the trick. A head of state whose military depends on Western training. Please don't forget that statement. Whose military depends on Western training and weapons. Whose economy is tied to CFA franc. Whose government needs European aids and loans. Ah, God. So the leader arrives in ECOWAS table, right, with different calculation than the one who has broken from those dependencies, which is Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger. All right. So the vote is African people. The condition under which the vote is being casted are not African conditions, right? So when Faye, as the new ECOWAS chairman, arrived in Bamako to convince General Assimi Goïta that Mali should rejoin ECOWAS, he is not representing African interests. He is representing the interest of certain powers that fund the organization of ECOWAS. And this is what I'm trying to say. Now, this is the diplomatic part of ECOWAS being used as a tool to pressure nation to submitting to the will of certain powers. You know them. Now, let's talk about ECOWAS being used as a weapon itself. All right. I will just give you just one instance. I know a lot of people can. I have so many evidences here, but I'm just going to give you one. In 1990, ECOWAS intervened in Liberia. I have a military man that normally tells me the story almost every day now, because that's the only thing, that's the only reasonable thing he can talk about in his life, in Nigerian military personnel. He said they went there and, whenever he talks, he'd be like, they killed a lot of people. I'm going to break down that fact to you now. They intervened in Liberia under the banner of peacekeeping. What actually happened? A regional force went into a sovereign country, and what followed was a 14-year civil war that was funded directly from Europe, that killed over 200,000 people. ECOWAS cannot financially sustain a 14-year war. It is being funded by the organizations that constructed this foolish organization. Now, the intervention destabilized the country for decades. That was ECOWAS, funded, guided, and coordinated by Western approval. When they said Nigeria should declare a no-fly zone over Niger, that is you blowing the trumpet of war. That was Emmanuel Macron's call. When there was a coup in Benin, ECOWAS activated Nigeria and Nigerians' military assets. They activated all capabilities. Nigerian people said that some of the aircraft they saw the country of Nigeria deploy on that day during the Colonel Pascal Tigris coup d'etat, they've never seen it before. Those aircraft don't belong to the security. It is not in Nigeria to serve the purpose of protecting Nigerians. Those equipment, even your troops, some of them that are being trained, they are not trained to protect you, a Nigerian that you are watching me. That is why you ask the question, why is it that your military or your military treats you as if you are animals? You can go to the media and type it, you will see the video there. Your police can open fire on you at any time. But when they see a foreigner, how do they behave? The whole security architecture was designed not to take care of you as an African, but to serve foreign interests. Same applicable to Francophone and Anglophone Africa. So the question is, when are you going to be free? Burkina Faso, for me, has completely decolonized that military. You only have a few that might still have that affinity for the West. Right now, with the pace at which those people are moving, man, they are uncontrollable at this point. The West can no longer do anything with Burkina Faso military. Just forget it. Now, this is the thing. In 2021, right, when The Malian military took power. ECOWAS imposed sanctions, right? Travel bans, asset freezes, a complete economic blockade. Now you can argue, all right, about whether the coup is justified or not. That is anybody's business. But the street will tell you if Assimi Goïta coming to power was relevant or not, because Bamako street was celebrating. But why is it that ECOWAS never asks for the popular opinion of the people? Immediately within 48 hours, they imposed all the sanctions in the textbook, because these organizations were not created in the first place for African sovereignty or for African unity. They were created for the interest of Western powers. All right? So, ECOWAS is a total tool, all right, through which the West force countries that are non-alliant, all right, that are non-compliant with Western principles and laws. They use ECOWAS as a tool to force them back. So when you see different presidents from Julius Maada, BO2 or whatnot visit Bamako and try to talk the AES states to reintegrating. See, when they say come back, reintegrate, it is not because there is anything sensible about this organization. It is not that there is anything valuable about this organization. It is, see, whenever they say these things, they are simply saying, come back to the and belong to that Western umbrella, that corrupt, dirty, disgusting umbrella. That is what they are. That is the message they are sending to these AES leaders every time you see them coming and saying that, please, you can come back and all of that. They are not. See, they are only coming on the orders of Emmanuel Macron and the rest. So, what the West is now trying to do is trying to pull the AES back through a leader in the name of Diomaye Faye that is indebted to France and dependent solely on EU funding and IMF loan, who does not even have the popular political support of his people in his own country, and they want to convince the AES to come back to what they call a so-called home. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the big pattern. Now, the proposal on the table from the Goïta Faye meeting, like everybody has been talking about, is likely what I'm about to tell you. Bring the AES back to ECOWAS. On the surface, it sounds like reconciliation, right? Or trying to renegotiate in a brotherly fashion, regional unity. But what it really means is this. It means that ECOWAS is a vehicle for Western interests. It's a vehicle that pushes or drives Western agenda in the continent of Africa, trying to reassert control over 3 countries that have already rejected that control. Now they came with a currency called ECO. Let me talk a little bit about that currency called ECO. So the AES have been building financial structures from the foundational level that is seriously institutional. There is a BCID that is meant to fund infrastructural development across the AES states. They can generate taxations from their uranium, from their gold, and a lot of things. Every trade, there is a certain percentage of tax that goes to that BCID. Now, remember, it's operational, right? If you look at most of the states' industries that are being built across these countries right now, those people are moving at a pace we've never seen before. The next thing between the currency and these states is the central bank. A single central bank for the 3 AES states. If they get to that point, there will be no looking back. Nobody will be able to stop them. France have already known that we have tried our best to break the resolve of the AES, but they have not been able to. On the military front, they have seen that they are recording little to no success. How do I mean? Initially, the interest of the West was to defeat the military strategically on the battlefield and unapologetically give them bad names. You know, like the old saying, call a dog a bad name and kill it. But they discovered that these people were beyond stubborn. They were, you know, they had a very, very thick skin to the point that even Iratel was seriously, you know, learning from the AES state. Now, what happens thereafter is that they launched a PSYOP operation. Because when you cannot defeat people tactically on the battlefield, you try to see if you can defeat them mentally. But ladies and gentlemen, every time they try new things, you know what Africa does? They improvise, they adapt, and they overcome. So until the West runs out of option. And you know, imperialist is a very bad student. They always come back the same way. So the billion-dollar question is, what are they going to do next? Okay? So they are saying that Mali, if it rejoins the AES, will have a lot of benefits. Now, they say if Mali comes back under the umbrella of an organization that is 90% administratively funded by African country, but operationally controlled by the European Union finance and by European Union's interests, Mali would have to abandon the security partnership it has with Russia, China, and Turkey. That is what they are saying. That is, see, this is what the message of Faye in Bamako, this is what it means. And that it will have to realign with the Western regional body. When they say Western regional body, it's not West African regional body. Don't let anybody lie to you. That is the economic community of West African states. No, it's Western regional body. I hope you get it now. It's Western. So if a regional body that is supposed to represent West, that's supposed to represent West Africa, activates a country called Nigeria, who is a disgrace by all parameters, a country that has military capability, offensive assault weapon of different grade, citizens getting kidnapped, murdered, ransom getting paid, peace deals being made with terrorists. Oh, thank you so much, Jack V. Thank you so much for the $50 donation. I appreciate it. Right? With all these dirty things that are being done in the country, and suddenly, Western interest is being threatened in a state, Benin Republic at the time under Patrice Talon administration. And all these assets and personnel that are Western assets. Listen, I don't want you to see your military personnel as your military personnel. Don't let anybody deceive you. They are not your military personnel. They only follow orders that is being given to them from Brussels and from Washington and from Paris. Check your international passport. There are two languages there. There is French language in almost all African states. International passport, you see French language there. Why is it there? If you are Anglophone, why is the French language there? If you are Anglophone, do they have your own language in their own international passport? Your military is not your military, it belongs to them, because the best we've seen them was when they went to defend the Western interest that was threatened in Benin. It wasn't the sovereignty of Benin that was threatened by Pascal Tigre. It was Western interest, the interest of Emmanuel Macron. And a call to Tinubu, and everything changed. So, this is what we are trying to expose to you. So this is what Faye was sent by the West to negotiate with Mali. And he went there as a leader who has already proven he will choose Western alignment over Pan-African sovereignty. So let me be clear, family. Sovereignty on paper and sovereignty as practical is two different things. The gap between sovereignty on paper and sovereignty practical is extremely big. All right? There is a guy whose pocket is filled with Western funds, who is controlled with Western funds, who takes order from Paris before he moves, whose weapons are being supplied by the West, whose currency is being owned by the West, whose government is exclusively controlled by the West, who takes his country resources only to go and get lands and build luxurious apartments in the West. Such is the case of the Guinean president, the Equatorial Guinean president, that said he wants to, that threatened, dared to threaten that he will break all diplomatic ties with France. But when you are conniving with these criminals, you don't know at the time. So my thing is this. There is no conversation between a lion and a sheep. For Assimi, Goïta is a lion and Diomaye Faye is a sheep. A common criminal for that matter. That is the fact. A man who has betrayed the legacy of the people's interests in Senegal walks into Bamako as if he's stomping the yard. So, ladies and gentlemen, you see, I look at the analysis that people give, all right, and this is how I give my own analysis. And long live my style of giving analysis. So let me say this. Faye's visit to Bamako yesterday was not about rebuilding Africa. It was about trying to bring the three sovereign African countries back under the Western system of control, designed to serve Western interests. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why I, Android72, have to call it out. Because it is a dirty tactics by Diomaye Faye. We know it will not succeed, but just to bring it to the public opinion. You definitely know that Mali will not agree. If the United States had to go to the point of lying that they are collaborating with Mali, what do you expect from a common puppet like Faye, right? So, ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoy the breakdown, you can help us by hitting the like, share, and subscribe button, because if you don't, you definitely know I'll cry. So you have to stay dangerous because your life depends on it, and ignore the propaganda because it be moving very fast. The propaganda be moving very fast, and we are seeing a lot of popular Western independent platforms that are using their platform to kind of undermine for people that can really, really look through the lines and read meaning to what certain people say. Advanced reading, talking about, are trying to use their platform to, undermine the AES state. Or they are not intelligent like people think they are. Because if you are intelligent, which I think you are, I think you should be able to see some red lines. You should be able to see some very deceitful information, right? But if you are intelligent and you can see propaganda and you choose to go with it, it is because you are intelligent, means it is not because you don't understand the essence of the message. It is not because of your complacency. It is because you choose to be complicit It is because you choose to be an enemy of Africans' liberation. And this is why I try my best to come every time to make sure I put clarity and sanity on some of these issues. So thank you, family. I love you all. It's been a while. And I'm very, very happy to see you all again. So to all the friends and families in the house, I want to say thank you and be blessed. Homeland or death.